Well, what is it? Quickly, I don't have time all day. A wise man like me does not have time for idle chatter, especially when I have so much to study. Jeremiah, Isaiah, all the other ayahs that they happen to have written. Well, especially also when you have so much to study about him. Sorry? Him, Jesus, who else could I possibly be referring to? We saw him. We saw his star. You're not following me, are you? Very well, let me try to explain. As you may be aware, I spend a great deal of my time observing the stars. Now, it was back in the days when Hammurabi was king, and there was some very curious activity in the heavens, which all seemed to be leading to the conclusion that a very significant event was about to occur. Then one night, while I was right here in my study, comparing some of our own texts with some of the texts of the ancient Jews, I looked out my window towards the west, and behold, a bright new star had appeared on the horizon. It was one that was in none of our charts, or none of our observations from the last 6 centuries. And then, throughout the week, it grew bigger and bigger, until it was bigger than Sirius. It was bigger than Andromeda. It became the biggest star in the galaxy. And then on the Wednesday, or was it the Thursday? Maybe it was later that week, when the star had received to the greatest and brightest point, in a rather hurried state of excitement, I jumped on my camel and I headed over to my colleague Itman's house, only to meet him on the way with my other colleague Wiseman on the way to my house. I said, "Friends, have you seen it? Have you seen the new star?" And they said, "Of course we've seen it. You'd have to have cataracts and gold eyes to miss it." And then I showed them some of the writings I had found from Isaiah. Here. Just a second. Yes. "And therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel." But my friend Wiseman had done reading too, and he had found this from the writings of Moses. Here. From the writings of Moses, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not yet. There shall come forth a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. We determined just right then and there that this must be the event of such great significance that it was prophesied about 6 centuries ago in the writings of the Jews. So at once we determined we would follow this star, and follow it we did, over hill and mountain, field and fountain. We followed yonder star until we arrived in Jerusalem. Now I think it would be rather reasonable to assume, partly because it was my assumption, that a king would be born in a king's palace. Fair, let's say. Fair, I say too. So he visited a resident monarch, a certain King Herod. Surprisingly, the monarch was very ignorant of the affairs of his own kingdom. Even such an event as this. So with no help from him at all, we continued. Which reminds me, I'm rather sick of the monarchical form of government. Remind me to invent something where people are elected by popular vote. I could call it, democracy? No, that would never work. Anyway, we followed on and on until we were past a few golf resorts and continued past a 5-star mansion, and we passed 5-star hotels. But we kept going because the star kept shining forth, so we left them behind and continued on all the way to a small little stable. A dirty, fragrant, See, hardly the place where one as wise as I would expect to find a king. But sure enough, as we stepped inside, behold, before our very eyes, the baby Jesus, God incarnate, mighty counselor, Prince of Peace. At once, we all fell down and worshipped him. What else were we to do? We're in the presence of God himself. And we gave him our gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, and yet, in a strange sense, they seem to pale into insignificance compared to the presence of the one who we were affronted. Later that night, my colleague had a dream. An angel from God told him that we shouldn't return to Herod because Herod had devised evil plans. So we went a different way. But friend, what a discovery. Of all the inventions of man throughout time, of all the discoveries of science, of all the philosophy of the human mind, this was greater. We found the Christ. You know, people tell me that I'm the wise man. And perhaps it is true. But if you would be wise, you too would find Christ. But he's not far from any one of you. He says, I stand at the door and I knock. Will you let him in? No, sorry. I must be back to my study.